Hi, everyone, and welcome to SPED Homeschool Conversations. We're glad that you are with us tonight. This month, we've been talking about electives, just additional non-core subjects, and why it's important to get your student involved in these things. And tonight, we're going to wrap that up with a very special guest. Professor Carol is with us, or Dr. Carol Reynolds. Welcome. Thank you for joining us tonight.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
I'm so excited. We've kind of planned out just what we're going to talk about, and the more that we are exchanging information, the more I got excited about this topic, and just unlocking your students' potential with the arts. And we're talking about the arts, but we're going to cover different areas of that. Carol's an expert in that, so I kind of want you to start by just telling us a little bit about yourself, your professional experience, and your involvement in the homeschooling community, just so people can get to know you if they don't know you already.
Okay, I'm Carol Reynolds. I go under the moniker Professor Carol. That's been a nickname for me, or a professional name, for the last, I guess, coming up on 11 or so years. I'm a music historian, began as a pianist from Roanoke, Virginia. My love of life starting in the 7th grade was things Russian, and the way things did develop, I was able to go in the early 80s to the Soviet Union. Actually wrote my dissertation in Leningrad then, going back a long time. Ended up through a lot of different things, living a lot of different places in Texas, your lovely Texas.
Yeah.
Almost, my Texas for 35 years, basically. And I was at SMU as a music history professor, and then retired early, got a goat ranch, believe it or not, out in north central Texas, up near Wichita Falls. You know where that is. We spent 10 years on the ranch, and then for a variety of reasons ended up moving to North Carolina, family reasons. Now we live in Winston-Salem. My connection to this whole world that I'm sharing with you started with my students at SMU, because I began to have homeschool.
Really?
Oh, absolutely. I could tell you their names. I see their faces. I think of them so affectionately, because I had these students that were a little different. They were smart. They were interested, and I ran our SMU in Weimar in former East Germany, our summer study program, and a lot of them would go on that, maybe because their parents hadn't spent all the money on private school tuition for the first 12 years of their education, right? But they were there, and they were so interested, and they knew so much, and they didn't tire, and they didn't say, okay, class is over, let's hit this, whatever. They wanted to know, where's the museums, and where's the where can we go for this? And we want to see that. And I've always thought about this architect. And I said, who are these kids?
Yeah.
So really, there was a certain girl named Allison. If she were listening, she would know exactly who I'm, dear to my heart, violinist and pianist. I'm sorry, pianist. I'm confusing my kids. I did, but at any rate. And one day I said to her, Allison, your work is so fabulous. Where did you go to high school? And see, this is still, early 90s, right? And she kind of looked at her feet and she went, and I said, what? I was homeschooled is what she said, but she said it so quietly. And I said the dumbest thing ever. And maybe this is silly to tell the story this long, but it just shows, I tell you what it shows, it's better now. But academics didn't know a lot about this, and a lot of them still do not know. They just don't. So I looked at her and said, well, this is so embarrassing what I said. I said, you look healthy. In my day, homeschooling meant a child was, had.
It was still illegal in a lot of states.
Well, it meant the teacher came, and brought you your work or something. I don't know. And she laughed and she said, you don't know anything about this, do you? And I said, no. And so she sat me down and she gave me chapter and verse. And I was flabbergasted. And I remember saying, your mother did this? And she said, well, yes, but, and then she explained curriculum. I didn't know it was legal. Anyway, that's what got me interested. All students like my Allison, and who are these kids? They have so much to offer. They have been brought up, there might be this or that, that I might tweak, but my goodness, they were powerhouses. So I came into this with a desire to know those students, and then of course to start finding courses that would teach history, culture, and other subjects through the lens of the fine arts. So that's how it all happened. That's enough to say, isn't it? But that's how it started.
That's amazing. Yeah. And so you have courses, video courses, and resources for parents. I know we have somebody joining us on our YouTube channel. So we broadcast on YouTube, Facebook, as well as Periscope all at the same time. So, but they were asking about resources for secular homeschoolers, and you can definitely go to Professor Carol's website. She like you said, looks at things through the lens of the arts, and the arts are may involve some religious. I mean, you go to an art museum, it's going to be religious art, there's going to be non-religious art, but you're going to find a whole mix of that. So,
well, and I will say what I've found is that when you're teaching the humanities and the arts, you're teaching in a tradition that goes way back. It's the tradition that came from Europe through the generation of the Second World War that immigrated to this country, and that tradition was already somewhat established, as in our American courses we teach. But boy, it came over in a big rush in the 40s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s. So we're really recipients of that extraordinary tradition of European arts and culture. And so basically, I don't change very much of what I do from my college teaching, with the exception of, changing levels and changing some expectations, thinning things out. And that's one of the grand things about the arts, is that whether you get a little of it or a lot of it, you've got the real thing.
Right. Yeah. And it can be modified because it's so visual or so sensory, and that's just an amazing thing. So, yeah. Well, before we go into unlocking potential, I want you to talk with us a little bit about how the removal of the arts to almost like this non-essential, frill type subject or hobbies happened, and how has that shift affected our cultural values of education in general?
That's a big question.
Let
me chip away at a little bit of it anyway.
Okay.
Well, and I think almost everybody could answer this, if you had a chance to stop and think about it. Especially if you're at the age I am, which I'm a child of the 50s, early 60s. So when I was a kid, you still had every classroom up through your high school, what you call your biology classroom. But even your homeroom still, some of them had pianos, certainly through middle school and certainly through elementary. And the teachers could play. Maybe not brilliantly, but they could play. The expectation was that people were literate musically. You had your songbooks, you had your folk dancing, you had your theater, even though it might have been hokey, you still were in plays. You memorized your poetry. That was an assumption. It wasn't whether you were talented. It was you needed to be made a cultivated person. You needed to be watered. It's a garden, you need to water it. And you watered it with all kinds of things, from Latin to folk songs, you see. And so that was not up for question. How well you would do, how much you would like it, who cared, really? You got it. And then, of course, we did a lot of things. One is we became, as you well know, it's a little more effort to learn how to play a piano than it is to push a button and hear 750 performances of a Beethoven sonata.
Right.
Once you got, and you can now blame the gramophone if you want. Let's go back to the 1880s and 90s and early 1910s and 20s, when the cylinder and the round cylinder, the flat discs came on, and they began from about 1939 recording classical music, recording music, right? So when you could crank and when you could push buttons and when you could now say, Alexa, play me some Mozart, right? The problem with that, and I go nuts with, and of course there's always exceptions, all right? I tend to make things just like that's it. So don't pay any attention to me when I say that, okay? But the problem with the electronics and the digital, and I beg parents, unless you've got some reasons where that is what you need to do, parent, keep them off the digital stuff. And I don't want toys that sing stuff to me. I want to sing to them. I want our children singing to them. Maybe it was Chatty Cathy that started all this, or, that's really going back. But the point is, it got very easy to get the gratification, sort of the gratification. And then, of course, the TV, which wasn't so threatening when I was a kid, but it quickly took over the world, the visual, and good heavens, look at it now. It's an absolute addiction, especially for small children. We have a major problem. I think that's a different topic, or maybe we'll get into it. But so all of that sort of opened the door for the trap door for the arts to fall out. It just fell out. If you think about it, we all became into this model of progressive education, and it's job training, and it's this and that, and Latin's dead. Who needs that? Wrong. Not every literature. Who needs all that? Who needs this? You don't need to learn to draw. Do you know how hard it is to draw a circle or a square? A shade, a circle. Oh, you don't need that anymore. Push a button. We don't need it anymore, because what's good is it? And then bingo was gone. And it costs money. We definitely don't need that.
Right.
It happened so fast, Peggy. So fast. Yeah. So fast. Okay, that was enough of that rampage. But seriously.
Well, but no, it's good, and it is completely shifted. And like you said, I never even thought about how that it it's replacing that replacement of what is so easily accessible now versus what it loses that creativity. I was talking to a guy who's a jewelry designer today, and he said, now we have these 3D printers and all these other things, but he said there is something about that, I could code in this, but while I'm carving, I may just add something a little extra, and it's that little extras that we miss out on when we get rid of those artisans and the arts, and we start mass producing that same thing over and over again.
It is really
so true. Yeah. Well, so then, looking at students who have struggling learning needs, how has this shift particularly affected them? Because so many of them are right brain thinkers, they have creative learning styles, and just their natural gifts tend to fall into this category. And then special ed just works on what you don't do well in all of the things that we've replaced the arts with. And so can you talk to us a little bit about, that struggle and how we've actually accentuated that, I guess?
Well, yes, there's no question that the culture has done that. And I'm no specialist the way you are, and many of those, who are watching your programming and working with you, and the colleagues that you have, that some of whom I know. I'm not a specialist in all this. What I do know is that, let's just start with birth. The thing about the arts, and here we mean singing, dancing, the joy of color and beauty, whether we end up being painters or not, we're artists in that we take in the beauty of the arts. We take in the feel of the velvet or the silk. We look at a painting and see how a master has painted the velvet and the silk to the point where you almost are sure you can hear it rustle, right?
Yeah.
All of these things, that is born in us. A little child, if you think about it, if a child is healthy enough, that child will sing before that child speaks. Now, that's not insignificant. Thank you. That child will dance well before it walks. You see these little ones, they can't even crawl hardly yet. But boy, you put on a Susan March and they are dancing. They are dancing and they are smiling.
Right.
And so you're singing at a fairly sophisticated level. If you think about pitch and volume and tone and all the things that you really learn to do with the voice, you learn to do it with singing before you ever say a word, right? We learn to do the motions before we can ever take a step. And every little child, if that child has vision or touch, is drawn to that which is beautiful. That's just there. We don't have to make that happen. What happens is that we take it away from them. The culture, the system, the pace, the value, what I would call false values that have sort of drained and rained in on our parade, so to speak. So it's all in a child. And you could argue even more so in children who have struggles, who have special needs. They are probably even more filled up by that grace of creativity than many another child. And so it's there already. The real question is now, what do you do with it? How do you bring it out? And how much can it feed not only the intellect, the soul, but the intellect, the motor motion, So shall I keep going or tell me?
Yeah, no, I love that because, there is that connection to what we call now therapies. I'm hearing this come out of you. It's just, but we've so compartmentalized it and professionalized what these natural things. And parents always ask us, well, why are these instances higher now that we're seeing that kids need speech therapy and vision therapy? And it can really funnel back to what you were talking about, is we have neglected exciting those senses in them.
Well, and trusting and we don't, and again, not, one of the problems especially when I tend to preach, I don't want to preach. I was preached too, so I like to preach. But no, I'm saying the problem too is parents, especially the age of the young parents. Again, not true of my parents' generation. Everybody sang. They sang different things. I remember watching my mother she had, impoverished New York immigrant garment district, New York. I mean, just every bit of poverty, every bit of lack of opportunity. As so many of the people, particularly women, but not just women, in that generation of the World War II generation, all the things from the First War and the Depression and the Second War and all those issues, right? But boy, oh boy, could she draw. No, she didn't ever draw anything that hangs on the wall, but I remember watching her in the newspaper. I mean, she would doodle at night. And and I would say, where did she learn? And she would draw these beautiful fashion. Remember how the fashions of the 40s, all the stuff she didn't own and never would get,
Right.
But Lauren Bacall or whatever it was, Kate Hepburn, not Audrey Hepburn, but Katharine Hepburn. She would draw all this stuff. And I would look at her and I didn't have enough sense to really ask. But I remember I would say, she was saying things like, I can't believe they're not teaching you to draw. We're talking about New York public schools where there was probably, a chair, a desk, and a light and a pencil, and not good paper. And yet those kids learn the basics of drawing. So it's not just the kids who are getting it. You've got a generation of parents. We've got 2 generations at least, maybe 3 generations. My generation was more solid, but still more hit and miss than my parents. And now, let's say we have at least 2 generations where people have not only not been taught, not been around a lot of real music making or dance. I don't care if it's clogging or ballet. I don't care.
Right.
Haven't been around acoustical music. Oh, don't start me there. Everything's on the speaker. I want to take all the earbuds, not the ones you're using right now for this. But
right.
I want to put them in a pile and bury them. These composers would go nuts if they knew we were, and of course they're not always listening to Mahler and Brahms, but they didn't write for this.
No, they wrote. It was an experience. Yes.
Yeah. The stage, the theater, rooms with halls with wood that vibrates, with chandeliers, with velvet. I mean, it's supposed to be this whole thing, and so we have parents that haven't ever had these experiences, and it's hard to pass on what you don't have.
It is so true. Yeah, I completely agree. And I pull back often to my classical ballet training and other things, and it affects so many places in your life that you don't think about that until I guess as I get older, I'm realizing my posture is affected by that, but then also how I listen to music, and I can count, I can read music just because my mom taught me how to do that, and it wasn't something that I particularly learned in school, but just the when you were talking about your mom drawing, my mom would sing. She'd just sing everywhere, and it was part of our family culture that singing was just, you just burst out in song.
Right.
So, yeah.
And we're scared about that now. And I do workshops a lot on hymns, and I do workshops on singing at these conferences. And, this thing about singing, I was afraid. It's funny, I was around singing all the time. I felt like my mother was singing with the radio with the Met up in Met broadcasts, on the radio on Saturday afternoons. My dad was sitting out singing Jimmy Rogers on the picnic table with his guitar. But people sang, and the family would come over and people would sing. That all sounds so quaint now. We can't even believe it. But what it means is people are scared to do it. People are scared to sing. And all the time I get in workshops, people say, oh, I can't sing. If I had a nickel for everybody who told me they couldn't sing, and of course, if you can speak, you can sing.
Yeah.
Now, if you can't speak, it's possible you cannot sing. If you can speak, you can sing. How well, whether you like it, whether you grow in it, that's a different issue. And so we're scared to sing to our children as a culture. People put on a CD with lullabies. Some of those are lovely, but wait a minute. They don't want to hear that. They want to hear mama singing, "Hush, little baby, don't you cry." And it really doesn't matter what you sound like.
Oh, no. The child is not a critic.
That's mama's voice. That's
right.
Great Aunt Susie's voice. They don't care. They want that. They've been listening to that voice since they were in you, moms.
Yeah.
They know that voice. That's the voice they need to hear. And it doesn't take much to get over the hump, but it is a hump.
Yeah.
It is an obstacle.
I completely agree. Yeah.
So we need to work on that. And if there's moms out there or dads, uncles, cousins, big brothers, I don't care. You got to go in a room and you've got to start saying, it's really not that hard to sing. I'll just take a single pitch and see if maybe it's this pitch and I think this is really weird and I must look really stupid. But if I could just get used to thinking of music this way and maybe thinking of more pitches, and the next thing you know, it's really not that hard to say some words, and kids think it's really fun when you sing to them, even if you sound totally bizarre. Mama, what are you doing? I want this kitchen clean in 10 minutes. And they can't really argue with that. And you get used to it. you
I
know,
love that.
and it works. It works.
Uh-huh. Oh, yeah. So much does. Yeah, and I think we've talked about, doing that same thing with, foreign languages too. It's you throw that little bit of fun into the mix or something out of the ordinary, and it just lightens up the moment, and it makes learning so much more fun, or just daily tasks. So
Or even
true.
clapping. You said you have a ballet background, which
Mhm.
you and I are just now getting to know each other a little
Yeah,
better.
I know.
But, to have that kind of, and someone could say, and the problem with it, of course, someone says, well, I didn't get lessons and I didn't get ballet and I didn't get art. And so that's not for me. But
Mhm.
everyone wants to dance, right?
Oh yeah.
Children will dance till we stop them. And
Mhm.
forget the violin. I love the violin. I don't mean that. But music doesn't have to be the violin. It doesn't have to be the piano. I mean, I brought,
Exactly.
and I know the sounds don't work very well on these broadcasts. But do
Mhm.
you realize how amazing bells are for little ones and what it would
Mm.
be? And of course, now if you have older ones, the acoustics, the physics of a bell. I don't want to keep
Yeah.
bringing it because I don't know what it does over the mics. 10 bells lined up. It's easy to find bells. Go to yard sales, go to estate sale, find bells, get on OfferUp, whatever. Hand bells sets that a church doesn't want. Just the dealing with children who may be struggling with lots of things to
Mhm.
work with bells. And then, another child's going to bang on the pots, and you take the wooden
Mhm.
spoon and the metal spoon and the whisk and I don't know, the piece of cardboard, and you bang away. They're experiencing acoustics. They are
Oh
they
yeah.
are doing what a composer does when a composer orchestrates a symphony, but they're doing it
Mm.
with different means. And it's the same creative questioning of sound.
Mhm.
So I guess the bottom, and I could go on and on and on about examples like that, but the bottom line is it does not have to be something that you drive 35 minutes for a formal lesson that doesn't go well every week because who's practice.
Right. Yeah.
It's right there in your home, wherever you are, is music, is
Mhm.
motion, is drama, because what's more dramatic than fighting with your little brother or sister, right? If that
Right.
is theater, I don't know what is. And, and sound. We're doing
Mhm.
the arts all the time. We just aren't
Mm.
always realizing it.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Or even allowing it to continue because we don't see the potential in what's going on. We just kind of maybe see it as an annoyance or all these other things that yeah, we missed the main point about the banging the pots and pans. I do remember that often.
Yeah.
That was the toy that while I was making dinner was safe, and so the kids would often play with those. And
Well,
yeah,
that's
yeah,
important. That's
hmm
really important. Kids want that which makes sense to them. And I was just at a birthday party, little, first 7, 8-year-old kids, and it was a lovely thing. And a child got an extravagant, let's just say an extravagant gift, one of these motorized vehicles that's better than my
mm,
car. You know what I mean?
uh-huh, yeah,
And it was a big box. And the parents have been very clever. The grandparents, whoever made this thing happen, they had
hmm
already assembled it and charged it up, right? Okay,
okay.
whatever. Do you know what the kids were into? So they put a bunch of packing stuff in the box. The kids were
Oh, they
into the
wanted the
packing stuff.
box.
The kids were into the box. I mean, I was cracking up because I knew. I mean, you're never sure, right?
Right.
But there was more joy because they had not the styrofoam and the paper, the cardboard struts, I mean, it was a party within that box.
Yes.
And I
Yeah.
kept thinking, yes, you go,
Mm-hmm.
kids.
Yeah.
Again, not to, it's fine, it's all, whatever, right? But we
Right.
keep thinking that it needs to be something sophisticated, complicated, expensive, high tech, and it's precisely the opposite.
Yeah. Yeah. So true. Yeah. What they want to use their imaginations. They want to
Yes.
create.
Yes.
We are made to create,
Yes.
and when we limit those things, we really limit our children. I
Yes.
totally agree with that. Yeah. And talking about creating, one of our guests said that he's interested in creating some unit studies. I would say go for it. There is such a need for people to be creating different things to inspire parents, to give them those resources that they need to get their students to discover and to learn. And he said that he's autistic, and art has always been his best subject.
Yeah. Oh, yes.
And mm-hmm,
There's a huge need.
yeah,
I mean, there's a huge need. How far it will go, where it will take you, which age group you're going to target, which parent group you're going to target too. It's the
mm-hmm,
parent. You're working with the parents when you're creating curriculum.
Exactly.
And that's one of the things I had to learn. I mean, it kind of made sense and it was actually explained to me, but it took me a while to figure it out because it's a child that takes the parent's excitement. Let's face it. You can have a child decide that cleaning out the Tupperware drawer is going to be the coolest thing that's ever happened.
Right.
And what children feed off of is watching the parents. So it could be to the person who wrote that question that you may want to create something that guides the parents through the process, as much as the child. What do I don't know. I'm just talking off the top of my head.
Well, no, and it's a guest I had a couple weeks ago has a Spanish or a language curriculum, and she said that she's learned multiple languages with her kids, but she said there was one that she wanted to learn herself, and she got so excited and was ordering like food from the same kind of culture, and her kids were going, wait, can't we be part of this? And she's like, no, this is mine. And so she was creating that interest in them just by pursuing it herself. And we can do that. That's so true.
And it's and another thing, of course, always to do is pull in your neighbors, one of the annoying things about children, and we were children once, I was.
Yes.
Remember? Y'all remember? Is that you could tell them 500 times per hour, per day, and one random person mentions it, and by golly, it's gospel truth, right?
Oh yeah.
Isn't that great? So if you could talk about the value of A, B, and C, it doesn't matter. Try. It's so good to be able to turn to neighbors, friends, people in your church, people in your civic clubs, the neighbors, whomever, somebody random in the grocery store,
right?
Who has a beautiful whatever, clearly ceramic piece of jewelry, and then you can tell they've made that, and off you go, and the next thing you know, there's this discussion of creativity, and your middle schoolers going, wow, doesn't matter what you say, it's this lady has just said it, right? So I mean, there really are a lot of resources for our people that really are. It's not just on us. It's supposed to be the tradition that has touched all of us.
Yeah, that is so true. Yeah, and it's keeping that alive, because we have so many other things crowding that out, that's saying it's more important. And it's those standardized tests and those anxiety producing things that get shoveled into our education system that just keep pushing out the things that are more important.
Well, and I'm not going to pretend to be a prophet. I've spent most of my life in the academic world. But these current times we're in are shaking some things up.
Yes, they are.
Nobody, as bad as so many things are for so many people who've suffered, so many, especially business owners, look, but there are some incredible things that are happening with parents who presume, within the brick and mortar school in particular, who presume, a different kind of experience was, and now they're, wait a minute. I want to do a Broadway musical called Worksheets. Is that all it is? Is that all there is? I mean, and a lot of people thought homeschooling was nothing but worksheets,
Oh yeah.
And guess what? No, it never really was. I mean, there are occasionally some worksheets, but just beginning to go, wait a minute, this is your hands-on cultivation of the child versus. And I mean, I think it's a fascinating time for that reason.
Yeah, it is. Yes, my husband and I were having that same thing, because he watches the news, and of course I'm running this organization. I'm seeing things blow up on the other end, and I'm like, oh, but there is so much good coming out of this.
Yes.
And
there is.
So
there is.
Yeah.
I mean, there really is. And I think I have to, we all, I think, have to give ourselves little pep talks, right, all the time, right? But this kind of a shift historically, as it is, always produces, it's the dross, I'm going to get this wrong, the dross and the gold, or right, it's the chaff and the wheat kind of moment in life. And from all these travails, historically, there were always these crystallized truths that we take away. And so I do think that in terms of the arts, people might rethink creativity in general. And you were talking about the whole right brain thing. Can I put in a favorite book?
Definitely.
And I bet you a lot of people know this. And I remember I drag this around with me sometimes, particularly if I'm speaking in a situation where people are, let's say not arts friendly, or they're, but what about, and you know what they say, but what about? And this is getting older, so it's not the trendiest as it was, because I think it's like, I should look it up. somebody else. But it's by Daniel Pink, who is a kind of an MBA think tank guy. I forget his background. I think he came out of Harvard or MIT. I forget. You can look at Daniel Pink. He's done a lot. These are the kind of books you grab in the airport and would read on the plane, you know.
Right.
But one that came out, and I want to guess. I'm probably going to get it so wrong today. 2006, 2011. I don't know. Something like that. Called A Whole New Mind. Why Right Brainers Will Rule the Future. It's a quick read. A Whole New Mind. And it starts out kind of painting I won't be spoiling anything. It paints the classic, you know, upwardly mobile, young, professional computer techie couple with their cool apartment and their car and their cool dog and all this, and, you know, the dream that's been achieved. Except as he points out, this couple lives in India, you know. This world of the high tech that was the cutting edge of our American economy, our future has moved offshore, ladies and gentlemen.
It has, yeah.
I mean, the bulk of where we were at the cutting edge of all that's not the cutting edge anymore in this country. And he talks about the future, and he talks about that whole thing, you know, where programmers or dimers does them, but what about people who can decode? What about people who can create? What about people who can solve problems? And he lays out the right brain qualities, empathy, you know, the ability to think multiculturally and multidimensionally and all of these creative things that are all right brain. He said these are, and then he gets into the whole economic discussion of how the future is not going to be the age of the industry or technology, but it's going to be the age of creativity.
Yeah.
So I like that book. I think it makes a good case to people who don't want to hear it. You may not want to read all of it, or you may just want to read. And I'll just say one more thing about it too, because I think it speaks to the parents. It speaks to people who are doubting that they can do these things. Because here he was highly accomplished, degrees all over the place, made a buku of money writing his business books, right? We don't even want to think about that. He decided that he didn't know how to draw anything. He realized that he didn't know anything, like nothing. He didn't know how to play an instrument. Okay, he didn't want to do that at whatever age he was. Let's make an age at 45. I don't know, maybe it's 38. I don't know. Maybe it's 56. So he decided to take a drawing class, right? And he shows at the beginning his first self-portrait. It's pretty funny. It's pretty funny. It's cute. And then he realizes he doesn't know what he's doing, and it really disturbs him. Because people are all accomplished in these important things.
Right, exactly.
They can't go do mi so. So at the end of the book, you see the portrait he drew after, let's say, a 12-week art course. It's amazing. So I use that. I'm not plugging his book. Never met the man. Don't intend to. But I think it's sort of like a little cosmos of what everybody who feels isolated from the arts. What happens when you plunge into something humbly, right?
Right. It opens new worlds to you, and until you do that, and the potential for your student, it's unbelievable. But even just taking that step yourself and creating that curiosity, it's so important. Yeah. Yannick says that her husband calls them soft skills, and we started out our conversation about that too. They're not. These are, when you look at what employers are looking for, they're not so focused on all of the academics anymore. They want somebody who's empathetic. They want somebody who's a team player, who has communication skills, and can think outside the box, who's creative, because that's where our industries are going, and the more important.
In this country, and Pink makes that point, and one of the things I liked about the book is that the United States, because we still have a much more multifaceted way of our cultures and our growing up in our neighborhoods and our, that we are better equipped than many places in the world to train for creativity or to cultivate creativity. And so we have every opportunity to regain, if you want to think about regaining the lead edge in the future, the way we did with the Industrial Revolution, perhaps, or this is the future can use a bunch of creatively trained American kids from all over the world who live here, with all of their different gifts and cultures and languages and everything that they're going to bring together. But they're going to be brought up with the opportunity to be more creative if we get with it.
Right.
With it.
That's the key, is let's get with it. So, yeah. So, we've been talking about this mental shift and families doing that and embracing that for their students' education. So I'm going to skip that because I think we just covered it without the question. So, but we've covered a little bit about the arts unlocking the potential for students, and just can you talk a little bit more about like well-roundedness and worldview and all of these other things that come into play with introducing the arts?
Okay. Well-rounded. I haven't heard that in a long time. I love that. You've got a lot. I have to think about that for a minute. But let me say this. Because of the work I do, and we were talking about that earlier, that I've been the last 10 years very privileged to work about a third of my year for Smithsonian as a professor on tours, which is, I tell everybody, it's a great gig, but you got to get old to get it. It's really wonderful. And of course, this year we're all home,
Yeah,
but
exactly.
Going back again. I spent a lot of time in Eastern Europe, Russia, Croatia, Poland, a lot of time in Poland. And anyone who's traveling, and you don't have to go far. You can go very far, very close by, and you find that most of the world values their creative traditions. They teach preschoolers how to do the Polonaise in Poland, little ones. As soon as they can count enough and make that little hesitating step up, as soon as they can do that and hold hands and not let go and maybe count to 8, they're learning to and they're going to Polonaise at their when they go from what we call the ceremony from elementary to middle school. They're going to Polonaise at what there would be their senior prom. They're going to Polonaise at their wedding reception. They're going to Polonaise. This isn't just a frill. Okay,
right.
Because part of being well-rounded, especially in smaller countries who have struggled for their independence, have had to fight for their national identity, like the Eastern Europe and Balkan countries and Baltic countries who have just been, overrun with domination. Those cultural creative treasures. It's not about, we think about individual. I have an individual talent. I want to cultivate.
Exactly.
This is our culture. These are our folk songs. These are our, classical means of expression. Our poems, our dramas. So they value them. And if you don't know them, you're not very well rounded. I'm getting back to that now. You don't know very much if you don't know your literature, if you don't know what your poetry is. And that's, goes back to classical education in a long way. I mean, when people knew the epics and they knew, I sing of arms and the man, I sing my history, right? That stuff was sung because you can remember it for thousands of lines. And so
exactly.
It's not, and I think sometimes that's where we also go wrong. Feeling like it's individual and it's maybe even a little selfish with our creativity, but it's not. It's the entire society that needs this. I don't know if that.
It's like a bond. It's a bonding experience. It is. It's an identity beyond your personal identity. It's what knits you together. Yeah,
it does. And it makes you, and it doesn't have to be just a homogeneous either, because one of the great things about the United States is that we've taken in the rhythms of the world and the cuisines of the world. That's especially in the last 50 years. And the decor and the styles and the this and the that. And so we, again, are uniquely open to that because we haven't had to fight off the Austro-Hungarians for 150 years or the domination of the whatever, the imperial czars who ran over all of our country. I mean, we've been able to take it and plant it as opposed to cherish it and keep it till it can come open again. And I think that's another way to study history. Is obviously studying history through the arts is an illuminating, liberating experience. And yes, I grew up, battles and more battles and then more battles,
Exactly.
Why are battles how we define history? Come on, give me a break. That's not what defines history. It is important sometimes. Sometimes it does. Mostly it doesn't. So again, the arts are the greatest way I know to study so many of these. And talking about being well-rounded. Let's be well-rounded by taking this enormous force of the arts. And
because it goes beyond facts. It goes into the emotions experience. Like you look at a painting made in a certain time, you know what the people were thinking of that time, or the composer, and what they wrote, and you feel that sense of whatever those emotions were of that time. So I
Well,
can
and you
see.
see it. I mean, one of the things about music, we talk a lot in our era from the 19th century. I think it's not what they cared about in the 17th century so much. I mean, a different sense of it. But music was a system, and it was needing to be properly done, and it needed these expressions. And you saw it in the fashion, in the wigs, in the cravats. I'm just reading something
Oh,
today
wow.
for a Pushkin course I'm starting this week through Memoria Classical Academy. I forget what they're called, but yeah. Anyway, that's starting on Thursday. I'll Pushkin 24/7. I'm just psyched because I haven't been able to do that for a while. But I was reading about a certain year in what would have been the imagination of Pushkin with his main character Onegin in the 1823. So at that point, there were something like 32 different ways for the dandy to tie his cravat.
Oh, wow.
And properly done for the ball in St. Petersburg in Tsarist days, you know. And you say, but well, that's weird. No, because that mattered, and that's something about who you were.
It expressed something.
And fashion is a big part of the arts, and decor, and you know, I mean, it's not. Again, I love the violin, but it's not violin lessons we're talking about here. It's about the entire tapestry where people it's integrated. And you know, look at you. You studied dance, right? How did you come to study dance? I'm curious.
My neighbor was actually trained by the New York Ballet, and so she offered courses at our local community school. And so I was trained by someone who was trained at the New York Ballet, and it very strictly. So yes, and so it was a good fallback for me just recently because I had surgery and I couldn't do my other workouts, but I could do my ballet and you know, help with my posture and. So yeah, but it's her words keep resonating, you know, through me, and you know, just the beats. I remember, you know, the classic music would play, and she'd just whack that stick, you know, and every time we had to be on the beat, and you had to feel it, and it's, you know, those things come back, and it was an experience. It was a whole, you know, it was training. It was just learning how to express yourself too through movement. It was a lot.
Well, and that's what you remember. You know, again, it's not about whether you're going to go out and be in the Nutcracker this Christmas. It's about maybe when you were 9 or 11 or 20,
right.
But it's that thing. You know, if you learn to throw a pot, I've always wanted to do that. You know, for example, I've always wanted to. I just haven't been able to do it. Mosaics. I'd love to take a course in mosaics or stained glass. It's the same thing. You know, my husband's always been interested in learning the bagpipe. You know, it doesn't matter. Yes, I'm all for the symphony orchestra. Of course I am. That's what I do. You know, that's what I deal with. But and if you have a master the way you did, you hear her voice not about dance but about life, right?
Oh yeah, it resonates through a lot of my life, and you know, it kind of shocks me sometimes when I see that connect, but yet it's a soothing reminder versus one that, you know, that makes me upset. So I don't mind it, but it was a very strict discipline, and but yet still enjoyable because it allowed that creative piece of me to come out, which a lot of things didn't, because I excelled in, you know, the math and sciences where my parents pushed me instead of the arts. So yeah. But
then you could also say too, again, thinking about someone who says, well, that's fine, but my child's never going to be taking ballet. I can tell you that right now, right? But dancing, I'm going to get off at dancing particularly, but dancing is what we want to do, you know, or clapping, or as I say, the movement aspect, the sway. We sway, we dance, we look at little kids especially.
Oh, yeah.
What is that? What is that? And so again, part of it is the elevation of what we call the higher culture. Learn the violin, learn the piano, learn ballet, learn this, learn to paint, learn to draw, learn all of it, you know. But move, sing, and even the smallest part of that is healing. Because a minute ago you were talking about therapy. I mean, these whole fields of dance therapy, music therapy, art therapy, they are booming right now.
They are, yes.
You know? Because they heal, because the arts heal.
So true. Yeah. And unfortunately, we have to look at it as therapy to make it excusable. Yes. But we need to move even further back to say this is why, for, you know, since the beginning of time, humans have expressed themselves in these ways, it is healing, and it's been part of our culture for a reason.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm agreeing with that.
Yeah. So, so what encouragement do you have for families who don't know even where to start? We've talked a little bit, about just everyday types of things, but maybe they're convicted to change, but go, what can we start doing? Just simple things to kind of to get us started. I mean, like you say, they don't need to like sign up for violin lessons tomorrow.
No. But maybe never, and maybe never.
Right, exactly.
That's okay too. There's enough first violinists. What you're building is not another virtuoso first violinist, unless you actually have one that shows up in your family middle sibling, this one, the fifth kid, she's clearly going to be, But what we're looking for is to train the children to receive the arts, consume the arts, not in the bad sense of consume, but the way we consume a juicy cantaloupe, or a beautiful souffle. We want to train audiences. We want to train people who love beauty, who see it and recognize it, and as they grow older, know how to deal with the arts that aren't initially beautiful. Because I like to talk, not necessarily here tonight, but about the ugly arts, things that are, I always get a thing like expressionist art. So, the art of the decades before the First World War and through the period of the First World War. Clearly, these people are not going to be painting gardens of petunias and pansies and, they're painting horror because they felt horror coming. So there's plenty of places where the arts aren't beautiful. But overall, the arts are expressing goodness and truth and beauty. And that's what they're doing. So we're wanting our kids to be receptive. And I do some workshops. Easy to find on my website, professorcarol.com. Programs, webinars that are there, strategies for teaching art history, strategies for introducing music to younger children. We have courses. We have a course called A Child's Treasure of Music, which outlines representative pieces from babyhood, if that's still a word, to 12th grade with just a little information. I do a little podcast for each one and just links to performances that it's just a guide. It's not a course, not a credit course. Most of our high schools, we have all these high school credit courses, as you know, but I think you told me your daughter was going to be taking one of ours.
Yeah, my daughter's taking one this year.
Oh, I'm so excited. You'll have to let me know what you think. But we do have things for the younger children, and of course we're going to be educating the parents along the way. Right. But what I would say again is think in terms of not so much as developing that child's ability to create. We do want that, but also to appreciate and salivate over creativity. That's it. So you do that you go into a fancy office building to the dentist, I guess the dentist or some, and you look up at the light and I don't know where you live, but you're in Houston, right? You know some of the architecture, and you get them to identify the way the light is coming through and why, and what happens with the shadows. And do you think you've got a fifth grader or third grader or whatever? Do you think that was accidental? How much do you think the architect? How would you design a building? Let's make popsicle sticks. Where will you put windows? Why are there windows here in the 17th century? And why are windows done differently in the Southwest? If you go to New Mexico, we got different windows than we got in New England. Weather is a factor. Sun is a factor. Values, religious and cultural values are factors. You can look at every building has an architectural style, whether it's 7-Eleven. I guess they still have 7-Elevens, don't they?
Oh, yes, yeah.
Yeah, it's really dating me. Where
we drove by a couple here in Virginia Beach, so yes, they're still around.
Not many, but whether it's that or whether it's the Opera Hall or the City Hall or the old. If you got an old country town. In an old country town, we were just driving through Tobaccoville, North Carolina, going to this birthday party, actually, and the buildings are ramshackle, and then there's a new bank, and you can talk about that, and you think, well, what would this have been like new? Go find some falling down place. You can find lots of them out in the country. What would this have looked like new, and why these clapboard, and why do you think they did this? And you get the kids to ask questions. Why did piano not? Why is it guitar and banjo in American westward migration? Well, you can't put a Steinway in a wagon train. Right, in a covered wagon, right?
Exactly.
So harmonica, it's singing, It's ukulele, it's banjo, instruments that
Right.
are sensitive to tuning and aren't going to fall
Mm-hmm.
apart if they fall out of the wagon. I
Right.
mean,
Yeah.
there's always a reason, and you get people. If you can cultivate in your kids questions, and you know what, it doesn't
Mm-hmm.
matter if you've got the answers. It
Right.
really
Yeah.
doesn't.
No. And just make them observers. I mean, it
Yeah.
just shocked me. My daughter is the artist, and so, but we went to Rome for 10 days, and she would
Ah,
sit in a cathedral and look at, I mean, of all the things you can look at in a cathedral, there's just like everything everywhere, and she's staring at the ceiling tiles and going, do you know that each of them are different? And I was like, hundreds of them. And I was like,
yeah.
I haven't even looked at the ceiling.
Right.
but but yeah, just to make them observers, and
Yes.
yeah, that we miss so much because we're just so busy and so fast, and doing things so quickly. Um, to make them stop, ask those questions.
And we think
I
it
love
costs
that.
money. I mean,
Yeah.
you're talking about buildings. It could be ceiling tiles. It could be cornerstones.
Mm-hmm.
Go downtown, I don't know, and look at, I mean, almost every building has a cornerstone. Oh, not, yeah, pretty much. I mean, the
Yeah.
7-Eleven may not, but,
Mm-hmm.
get them to look for cornerstones, or get them to look for shutters, or get them to look for porch designs in your neighborhood,
Mm-hmm.
and teach portico, and teach classical symmetry, and teach,
Oh yeah.
why did the porches go? Let's talk about culture. Let's talk about technology,
Mm-hmm.
air conditioning.
Right.
Suddenly we didn't need them anymore, so now we don't see anybody anymore until the
Mm-hmm.
shutdown, and now we do see everybody in our neighborhood. But
Right.
suddenly you're doing cultural history, you're doing economic history, you're doing political history. But if you take one
Mm-hmm.
item, it's just amazing what they'll start seeing. And you don't need much. Get a little architectural book designed for a fifth grader, Introduction to Architecture.
Mm-hmm.
Teach. I think it's fantastic to teach architecture. I'm not saying a doctoral seminar on architecture. I'm talking about
Right.
what holds up the things we're in and why they look
Mm-hmm.
like they look.
Yeah.
And kids
Yeah.
love that, because
Uh-huh.
everywhere you're in buildings all the time, and they
You
all have
are.
a floor, and they
Yep.
have windows, and they have a ceiling of different heights,
Mm-hmm.
and they have doors, and all of that they can learn to describe. And
Mm-hmm.
before I was telling you about another resource that I'm very hip on. If you
Oh
don't mind,
yeah.
can I
Yeah, because we only have a few minutes left, so let's
and
let's
this
go
is
through
not one of
those.
our. Come see our stuff, okay? And you're probably going to mention. I think we have a
Yep. And so is that on your website too? That book
Child's
that you're
Treasure
gonna.
of Music. Yeah, it shows a
Yeah.
little kid with a gramophone, listening to a gramophone. And we have our
Okay.
other courses for the middle school. We have theory courses. We have Imperial Russia, Early Sacred Music, Discovering Music, America's Artistic Legacy. We've got a bunch of stuff. I can't even think about what it all is.
Okay.
And we are doing right now, I think I mentioned to you, 25% off.
Yeah. So if you use this code
Yeah, there you
TS, 2020. So T as in Tom, S as in Sam, 2020. You'll get 25% off and free shipping.
Time sensitive.
Time sensitive, yes.
Or terrific stuff, whatever, it
Right.
doesn't matter. But yeah, so, I mean, please, if you have questions, write me, whatever. But this is not something we have, but Melissa Sermon, I'm just a real fan of her. I was telling you, she was in my grad class long ago at SMU. She did her master's at SMU down in Dallas. Surman. It's called The Joyful Grammar of Music. And she's Kadai trained. So the actual book for the children, this is for little bitties, but it might also be for a child with many, many obstacles that is you're trying to figure out as a parent how to teach rhythm, how to teach pitch. It's done with the most beautiful pedagogy, because Kodai is beautiful pedagogy and very, very visual, and just, learning theme and variations, learning all these musical concepts. And what I love about it, I mean, she herself as a parent, as a teacher, having worked with children of all ages, and look at the book for the parents, that's the teacher's guide. And it is so exceptionally detailed and organized. I remember her as just an incredibly bright student. And that, they're all 22 or 23, and then they grow up and they have their families, and you check on them 20 years later. And so Melissa Sermon, The Joyful Grammar of Music. If you are
I've got it down on the
very young children,
too.
Or children with many, many obstacles and challenges, but you want them to learn the basics of music, you really might want to take a look at that. I think it's just gorgeous book.
Awesome.
Gorgeous book.
Yeah. And then you have the Hooray and Hallelujah Songbook. that you gave me information on. And I'll put this link down in the link so you can click on it, because I know it's really long. And if you're watching on the YouTube, I'll make sure it's in that description as well. And if you're listening to the podcast, just go to our YouTube channel and look for this interview, and you'll be able to see it there.
Hurrah and hallelujah. So, that's an old traditional song, but going back to what we were talking about, singing. And as I was telling you, we put this together recently. We've wanted to for a long time, because all the songbooks are up in the attics, and they're 90 and 110 years old, and they're crumbling. A lot of them.
Yeah, I would go to antique shops and look for just those hymn books, because I love them, and but yeah, they're very hard to come by.
Yeah.
So
we've pulled out the old good ones. We've got the who put the overalls, and Mrs. Murphy's Childer, and all these old folk songs, and children's songs, and counting songs, and sentimental songs, and some hymns as well. And it's that legacy of song that you were brought up around, and the grandparents and great grandparents of a lot of your listeners took it for granted that they would hear these songs.
Right. Yeah.
So we don't want those songs to go away.
And now we hear Baby Shark, and what does the fox say? That's what my neighbors play constantly on their Alexa, and I'm just like, how do we tune this out?
Well, it's got a little place. It might be in the but it is not the entire world. It means if you only ate sweet potatoes, and I love sweet potatoes, but what if that were let's say marshmallows instead. There are other foods, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. You got to get beyond your comfort zone and kind of move out from just that one selection.
Yes.
I have to totally agree.
Please.
Yes.
Please.
So we had one comment said, I'm thinking about how I could use these principles to teach animation. I think it's curiosity. It's really what it boils down to. Everything that we talked about is just igniting that curiosity with creativity, and not burying it, not forgetting about it, and getting so swamped in the core of what we call education and important subjects.
The technology too has blurred everything. My granddaughter just was reading herself to sleep upstairs there with a book on Disney, an old book on animation. And they've got all this digital everything. They get all the visual, and yet if first of all, if you keep that stuff away from them as much as possible, please. But they are, those little books where you flip the pages and you get to see the person dance the tango, like in the old, the old, what do they call them? The magic lantern shows when they would first put together. Kids have no idea that Disney was hand drawn to the person who was asking animation. You will get more thrill in a child who figures out how to do, whether it's even 3 drawings or however you would teach it. They have no idea how that stuff was done before somebody pushed a button again. Yeah. And lost the heart and the soul of it. I know it's impressive. Sure, it's impressive. Watching a cooking show is impressive too, but it doesn't feed you. You will not be less hungry. Right?
Exactly. Yeah, you can watch a lot of cooking shows and still not make good food.
And not even get to eat. Not even get to eat. So, the basics are what is missing. The person who's talking about the animation, I don't think children have any idea. Yeah. What, or that they can even do a tiny bit of it themselves, and they will be thrilled. They will be thrilled. Yeah, I'm sure of it.
Oh. So agree. Yeah. Got another comment from a viewer. She said, lately I've been thinking of trying out piano for my 11-year-old son who has autism, hoping to learn how to teach him with the guidance of a piano teacher. And that goes back to what we were talking about, is, the parents' own creative, or their own interest in that, and spurring that then in their student.
I just had on my blog, and this may or may not be useful to that family, but ProfessorCarol.com, it's actually still on the top under, if you scroll down, should I force my child to continue piano lessons? I was just taking up that topic, and there's about 10 points. I've got some wonderful comments, by the way, of people who are looking back at their own childhood. But one of the things with piano is that it's very lonely. Now, that may work well with your artistic child.
Yeah.
But when and it may be the best choice. Whereas if you play in the band, play in the orchestra, you're with other kids immediately. As soon as you're halfway decent, you're playing duets, you're playing trios, you get to go to music festivals, even if you're moderately good, piano,
Right.
you're sitting in the living room,
Yeah, you just
And
have
so,
yourself.
exactly. So I think what we're going to talk about with the piano, one of I go back and check that out. You'll find it in professorcarol.com. You'll see it, or else write me and I'll send it to you, the link. But singing, you get the child to sing. If you have a teacher who is not singing, having the child sing, learning. I mean, it's really a completely different musical experience. Okay, row your boat, first thing, but to be able to go row, row, row your boat gently down the stream, merrily, 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 merrily. Life is but a dream. You say, well, okay, that's not teaching piano. No, that's teaching melody. That's teaching legato. That's teaching expression.
Exactly.
If you're going to play, they're going to be struggling, that's a bad example, but the point
right. Well, because there's so much mechanics involved in it instead of just the expression.
But the singing voice and singing with your child and singing through the notes first and a bunch of different things that I was suggesting. Singing is the key to learning any music. And it's really training the ear. It's not the fingers that play the piano. It's the ear that plays the piano.
Yeah.
It's the ear and the heart and the brain a little bit, mostly the ear. And how do you teach the ear? There's not a lot of difference. These are real close together.
Exactly.
Don't go down here. The keyboard is in your brain. I use example, and I think it works. I mean, I know it works. An NBA basketball player doesn't turn to shoot a 3-point and go, now where is that basket? They know where that basket is no matter where they are on the court.
Yeah.
Basket. And when you danced, you knew exactly where you were spotting, right? The keyboard, the art, it's all in here, and the ear is the teacher for music. Period.
Yeah.
And that means singing.
Yeah. Yeah. And you can teach so much. I remember the mind flip it took to do to sing, row, row your boat, and then somebody would sing, starting halfway through and, in rounds, and that just throws you, but it's,
In Hurrah and Hallelujah, which I just happen to have here, we did a section on rounds, because rounds used to be what people did for fun. There it is, rounds and cannons, because rounds are a lost art. That's teaching polyphony. That's teaching 4-part writing, but you haven't even learned it yet. And it is very hard for a child to do that at first. It is very hard for a child to do that. And there's a reason why it's very hard. It's a very sophisticated skill. Never underestimate how sophisticated. And the key to it is singing.
That's awesome. Well, thank you, Carol. We have gone over our time, but this has been such a delightful conversation. I just want to thank you for sharing with us. I hope it has encouraged a lot of parents that this is possible. This is necessary, and it's very important for your student, especially if they struggle. And you can visit ProfessorCarol.com. She has a lot of good resources, and also take advantage of her 25% off with that TS 2020 code. And just thankful that this COVID has allowed you to create some other things that you normally wouldn't have, allowed you for some interviews that maybe you wouldn't have had time for with your travels. And
you too, right? A lot of people.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. But we'll all come out on the other end better, and hopefully, with all the more homeschooling, we'll see some kids' lives dramatically change.
Or rethinking. If it's still brick and mortar, a lot of people are going to rethink it.
Yeah.
And the blessings are always in there in the darkest moment. So we want to pray for those blessings for everybody.
Yeah.
Thank you for inviting me. This has been a blast. Thank you.
You are welcome. Yeah. So this wraps up our month-long segment on extracurriculars, which, really aren't extras. But I knew that when I set this month up. We were just going to try to get you hooked on that. But next month we're going to be talking about family health, and so not just family health, but children's health, parents' health. And our interview next week is with Dr. Heather Manley, and she's a neuropathic doctor, and we're going to talk about empowering children and teens to make healthy life choices. So that's what we're on to next month. And so all of our blogs, all of our broadcasts will be about about your family health, because it's important. And so we're going to focus on that. So, anyways, thanks again, Professor Carol. Appreciate your time. And thank you all for joining us. And we'll see you again next week on SPED Homeschool Conversations. Night, everybody.
Bye.